Good morning. My name is Rob Lilly, and I am the General Director of Lilly Training and Inspiration. And I am also a physiologist, and I work on exercise science with athletes of all backgrounds. I also work in biomechanics on quickness, strength, injury prevention, and all things athlete. And today we're going to be talking about running from a standpoint of how to build a schedule, why a schedule is built the way it is, and frankly, my opinion on how to create the best athletes from a running standpoint for both cross country, which is the season we're getting ready for now, and also we'll touch on how track athletes become more efficient and so on and so forth. In a future video, we'll talk about type 2B muscle fiber athletes and type 1A muscle fiber athletes and how to effectively help them do what we're going to talk about today from a standpoint of create a schedule. But right now we're going to talk about generalities, and I want to give some teaching points to all the athletes I'm working with, and then we'll put this in a place where they can find it to utilize it as they go back to working with their awesome coaches at the high school or collegiate level. But I want to do some teaching here, talking initially and consistently about a few things. So we know that athletes and runners, specifically runners, work off of what's called a lactic threshold variable. Lactic threshold is very simple. It's the level at which your body starts to accumulate lactic acid at a level that it can't displace it or get rid of it. Lactic threshold for athletes who are fit usually lands around 88 to 90% of their max heart rate. We're going to work with the concept of 90% for a little while here today because it's an easy 10% manipulation number, and doing things in 10% is pretty easy. You'll notice on my graph over there, there's a bunch of numbers, and that's just for you to look at. So this is with a 6-minute miler, person who's running like an 18:35K, and then an 8-minute miler, somebody who's running somewhere around a 25-minute 5K, maybe a little bit less. So maybe later we'll do one around a 5-minute 5K, but we'll touch on some of that as we go through this graph today. So first and foremost, when athletes run, we tend to see them sit in very similar pockets of time. And so for me, an athlete who runs consistently in their speed work as a variable, in their tempo running as a variable, in their easy running as a variable, and then in their recovery running, where they're changing their speed just minimally, tends to run in what we call the black hole. So the black hole is a place where you're not going to have a lot of growth, and as a byproduct of that, you're going to see student athletes get tired throughout a season and maybe start to actually get worse through the season. And so we're going to talk about how that affects athletes. The other things we're going to talk about today are speed work, which I call speed variability. Okay, and then we're going to talk about tempo work, which all the coaches now call threshold because people have watches that will show them their heart rate. But we're going to talk about it as a variable called tempo, which is a feel more than it is an actual time on a watch or a heart rate on a watch. And then we're going to talk about easy runs, and we're going to talk about recovery. If I was to just put percentages of heart rate into these 4 areas, let's do it with red so it's easy to differentiate. I'd say speed work should be happening somewhere around 90% of a max heart rate. This is all based around max heart rate. Tempo running, if you're going to look at it as a percent of max heart rate, should quite possibly be around 80%. Easy running should be around 70%, and then recovery running should be 65% or less. Here's something that's really, really important for all of us to understand. Every student athlete is going to come and find one of these 4 areas where they spend most of their time feeling good. So their black hole, whatever workouts they like, is the area in which they're going to be feeling the most comfortable. And what we need to do to help athletes grow, very simply, is we need to manipulate each of these areas to be more effective and get away from the consistency of running always in the same speed. So if I'm somebody who's running 6-minute pace, and I'm doing it consistently, when I run easy, more than likely what we see athletes doing is they're going to run somewhere around 7-minute pace. Their speed work is going to be somewhere around 5:30 or a derivative of 5:30 pace. And we're going to put them in a situation where they recover at somewhere around 7:30 pace. If all of your paces are within 2 minutes, so 7:30 to 5:30 going down, you're probably not having the most growth you can have. So let's break this down a little bit into our actual graph here. When I have an athlete run at 90% or at lactic threshold, we know that we call that speed work in the world I live in. So I'm going to have an athlete come into our workout and they're going to do two things. They're going to warm up, and it's going to be a proper warm up where they do dynamics, a jog, maybe even a little turnover work. After they warm up for a particular amount of time, a lot of kids, we want to warm up from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. Sometimes coaches will have you warm up for 1 mile. Basically, if you do dynamics and you warm up for 1 mile, that's going to be somewhere around 15 minutes. We are now ready to do a speed workout, okay? My days that we do speed, and I'll build this out, are Tuesdays and Thursdays. So speed for me on Tuesday is going to be some derivative, and it says it on the open over there, where I'm going to start kids at either 200 meters or 400 meters. But here's what should happen in speed. Okay, I'm going to draw it with different colored pens so you can see the obvious change. After we warm up for 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to put a kid into a place where they're going to run into this lactic threshold line and then eclipse the lactic threshold line. And then they're going to recover by coming off that lactic threshold and back down. We're going to talk about this specificity in a moment, but for all of eternity, we call these repeats or intervals, and all a repeat or interval means is that we do them repetitiously. So we're going to put repeats in a situation where we do multiples. Okay, a couple things we want to cover when we do speed work. One, we know it needs to be above 90%. We've measured it here, we've measured it here. When I have an athlete doing these, if they're at a 6-minute pace, 6 minutes divided by 4 is 90 seconds. If I'm doing anything near 90 seconds, I'm not having any growth. So for my student athletes, what I'm going to ask them to do usually is try and get somewhere around 80 seconds for 400 meters. Now, coaches sometimes say to me, but if they're racing at 6 minutes, they won't be able to go 80 seconds. If you can't go 80 seconds in 400 meters, then we're going to break down the distance you go to half that to 200 meters. And we're going to try and do these intervals at 40 seconds. Because I know that if we just run 90-second intervals, we're going to have no growth. And our student athlete's not going to have any opportunity to become more efficient at running. So I like to start at 400 meters. I like to take just over 10% off of the speed in which the student athlete's going to work. Once they do one interval, so this would be 1, 2, 3 intervals for this example, I'm going to have them recover for 2 times the amount of time they did the interval. This would be week 1 we're talking about now. If they go 80 seconds for 400 meters, their recovery interval is going to be 160 seconds or 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Once I have a student athlete do this, I'm going to ask them to repeat it. Most oftentimes, my first workout for student athletes is going to be somewhere between 4 and 6 400s or 6 and 8 200s, depending if they can hold this pace at 80 seconds. If a student athlete can't do 4 by 400 at 80 seconds, if they're a 6-minute miler, I'm going to have them do 6 to 8 200s at 40 seconds with the same derivative, meaning a 1-to-2 ratio. This ratio is something that's important at the beginning because most student athletes can handle, as long as they have enough recovery, can handle a pretty hard interval at a faster pace than what they're going to race. What I see all the time consistently across different coaching styles is that a lot of coaches have athletes do this 80 seconds and then they want their kids to go back and run again in 1 minute. I'm not saying that that's bad. All I'm saying from my standpoint is that's more of an effective tool after we do maybe 4 or 5 weeks of something that they can recover and actually bring oxygen back into their body. So here's some things that we know about this. We know from being a physiology guy who went to school and learned and went to class is that at the end of the day, if my heart rate goes up to whatever it's going to go up to right here, if I recover minus 35 beats from whatever my heart rate is at the top level, that's this level, I'm going to bring oxygen back into my system. We're going to bring oxygen back in. We know that an anaerobic interval puts us in a position to be out of oxygen. So if my heart rate for a student athlete gets to 180 beats a minute, at the top level of this 80-second interval, I know that this back half in 2 minutes and 40 seconds should allow me to bring down my heart rate by 35 beats a minute. Okay, 35 beats a minute off of 180 is going to be simply 80 minus 30 is 150 minus 5, 145 heart rate before I do my next interval. And then I can start my next interval once my heart rate gets to 145. So athletes all the time say to me, but Rob, 240 is too long for me. Great. After week 1, we can manipulate 240 and make it whatever we think it needs to be. But because we're coaching an athlete to be successful, we're going to have them do, like I said, if it's a 400 day for week 1, it'd be 4 to 6 by 400 at 80 seconds with a 240 recovery. Speed, recovery. Okay? Once we do this, and we see that an athlete tops out each time and actually recovers each time, we've had growth. And I'll explain that in a moment. Okay? So this is week 1. Now, we just talked about having our athlete feel really good. We want to go to week 2. Week 2, I'm only going to change one variable. I know the way this video camera is set up, you can't see this very well because there's a line from the light, but it says changing one component. We're going to change one component of the work that we're doing here. What I want to change from this work is I want to recover slightly different. In the first 4 weeks, I'm going to change one component for sure, and most times I'm only going to change one component for all the weeks I do interval work with kids. Because if I change one component, I'm going to have an access point to know if they're having growth or if they're not having growth. So, 80 seconds for week 2 stays the same. Now I'm going to recover at a 1 to 1.5 ratio instead of a 2 ratio. Again, this is only week 2. This is the second week of August, and we don't race until week 4. I can manipulate this to see if my kids are getting stronger, heart rate stronger, body stronger. So now I'm going to do a 1 to 1.5 ratio. Well, 80 plus 40 is 120 seconds. So now my ratio here, week 2 is 1 to 1.5 ratio. Okay, we're still doing 4 to 6 intervals. Let's say we do 6 by 400 this time, because last time we did 4. So this is week 2, and now my ratio is 80 to 120, which is also 2 minutes. Okay, we talk seconds here, 80 seconds to 120 seconds. So now I'm going to recover for 2 minutes. If I'm fit, and I do 80 seconds for this, and my heart rate gets up to 180, when I recover down to 145 because I minus 35 beats, knowing that that's going to bring oxygen back into my body, if I do that, I should be able to do more intervals of this and have the same peak with a very similar heart rate, without my heart rate going up to 205 or 210, and then I should have the same bottom. It should take me the same amount of time to recover. And this would be week 2. If I do this from 180 and I recover by 35 beats, what I'm basically doing is teaching my body that I can recover more quickly, and as a result, I'm going to be more efficient. Okay, that's week 2. If I've done this correctly, I now have 6 intervals here where I've gone 80 seconds fast and I have 120 seconds recovery or 2 minutes recovery. This is still for a 6-minute miler, and now what I'm doing is I'm teaching my body that I can do more quarter-mile pushes or intervals or repetitions, and that's going to help me build a base to go faster when I run my next 5K. Let's do one more week, week 3, and then we'll talk about some other things. So week 3, now this is going to be a little bit of a push. Let's skip week 3 actually. Let's say we do similar things to this over week 3 and week 4. So let's just actually cover week 3. So this is what it looked like. Week 3, now I'm going to do 120 seconds recovery, and I'm going to pull my speed down to 76 to 78 seconds. So my student athlete has been going 80 seconds with a heart rate of 180. Now I'm going to manipulate that, and I'm going to bring it down to 76 to 78 seconds. I'm not going to change my 120 here, so I'm going to basically change my ratio. In week 3, my ratio is going to go to a 1 to 1.6 ratio. I'm going to go from 76 seconds, to 120 seconds. Again, we're changing one component. So now, week 3, I do all of these instead of at 80 seconds at 76. 76 with 120, 76 with 120, and so on. And if I do that consistently, and I feel pretty good, when I get to the top of my heart rate zone, although I'm going faster because I've been teaching my body to be more efficient, I am now still at around 180 beats per minute. But what has changed in week 3 is I'm able to do it much faster, and my heart rate has not changed at the top level because over these weeks, I'm becoming more fit. The reality of this is if I do consistencies week in and week out, and I change one component, I'm putting you in a position to have success that you can visually see, that you can write into a journal and be positive about, and that will give you a goal orientation of how you're doing toward your goal. If I do this correctly, by the time we get to week 4, we've had a physiological change. We mentioned it a moment ago. Now I'm faster, and my heart rate hasn't changed, which means my effort hasn't changed. I've just become faster. If we skip ahead a little bit and we get to week 6, I'll do one more here, and then we're going to talk about tempo work. But if I get to week 6, and I can do week 6, if I take some of these numbers out, 76 and 120, let's say week 4 and week 5, I stayed at 76, and then I tried to recover a little bit quicker than that in week 4 and week 5. Let's say my ratio for week 4 and week 5 got to 1 to 1.25. So that's 100 seconds, or 1 minute and 40 seconds I'm recovering at, and 76 seconds fast. Now I'm putting myself where I'm now recovering quicker, and I'm going faster, and my ratio ends up being 1 to 1.25. This is for week 4 and 5. I am becoming more efficient. Now let's say I get to week 6, and I'm going to change a few things. Now I'm going to try and go 74 seconds with a 0.25. So let's say 90 seconds or 1 minute and 30 seconds recovery. And I'm able to repeat that again and again. What you'll notice is all of a sudden my heart rate that was 180 is now going to be a little bit lower, 175, which means I'm working less hard for much better output because I put myself in a situation to have growth, because your heart as a muscle is going to grow if you put stimulus in that's similar again and again and again. Once I get to a point where I've done this, the byproduct of all of this over 6 weeks, get my other pen here, is that my lactic threshold that was 90% we know, if we do the math of 6 minutes, being 90% racing, now my speed has gone up right here, and right here, and right here, and right here. Now my lactic threshold line is here. All of this is growth over 6 weeks. Now my speed at the same intensity level is 5 minutes and 40 seconds per mile, okay, which would be 75 times 4. So I took, instead of 80 times 4, we've become 75 times 4 by doing the work each week. That's 5 seconds per quarter mile faster. And now I'm at 540 per mile faster, per mile 5K. 540 plus 540 plus 540 of 6 minutes is 1830. 540 plus 540 is 1120. Plus 40 seconds is going to be 12 minutes. Plus 5 is 17. Now I'm at a 1730 in 6 weeks' time. Now, is that exactly what happens? No, because the variables could be a little bit different. But if I can get you to be a 1730 runner instead of an 1830 runner in the midst of 6 to 8 weeks, isn't this what we want? Now, most coaches say to me, but that's too much time to recover at the beginning. A 1-to-2 ratio where they recovered for 240 is too much time. And I say to them, you're not racing week 1. You're not racing week 2. These are weeks to grow, weeks to have success. And to be honest, what if it takes me 12 weeks? What if it takes me 2 of these 6-week sections to go from 1830 to 1730? At the end of 12 weeks, we're normally sitting in a place where we're going to we're going to invitationals. At 12 weeks, as a racer in cross country, that'd be August 10th to September 10th to October 10th. Now we're moving through this 12th week into the 13th to 14th week, which are conference and regionals. And if I can get you faster in weeks 13 and 14, and it takes you 12 weeks to go 1 minute faster because we've done this, all of a sudden, my friends, you're running 17:20 at regionals and 17 minutes at state. And if you're a freshman or sophomore and you keep doing this, by the time you're a senior, and this has been done lots of times by lots of athletes I work with, you're all of a sudden going to be running 15:40 to 16:40 at the state meet. And I can name tons of people that I work with that do this. But all we've done, again and again and again, is we allow our athletes when they're young or at the beginning of the season, we allow them to recover fully so they can put more effort into more intervals without dying. And if we do that, we're going to have success and growth. It's very straightforward because you can watch growth happen. And if you have a bad day, let's say your 4th interval on your 6th week goes poor, then you're done for the day because your body maybe hasn't had enough rest, maybe has had too much caffeine, maybe you're feeling tired or uncomfortable because you're sick. All of those things your body will tell you because your muscle as a heart will share the information. So if I get to week 4 and I'm feeling terrible, I only can do 4 intervals and the goal was 6 intervals, then I'm done. You don't push a kid past that because it puts them in a situation to go into oxygen debt, stay in oxygen debt, and as a byproduct of being in oxygen debt, they can't recover. And they feel terrible for 3 days, 5 days, 8 days, 10 days, 12 days. If it's 12 days of a kid feeling terrible because I pushed them through, because it's great to push kids, it puts us in a situation where now we're 12 days behind. So now instead of being recovered at week 6 and having this 5:40 pace, instead of 6-minute pace that we started with, now I've just fallen backwards into 5:55 pace because I put my kid in a position to fail. This, my friends, is speed work, interval work. You can break all these numbers down and do it by 200 meters. We will have growth. I see it all the time, and all I'm doing is helping my kids find their growth. And I don't care if it takes them 6 weeks to get to growth, because the first 4 cross-country meets, 5 cross-country meets of the season are not the ones they're trying to be the most effective at. And as all of you know, whoever's watching this, you are not going to PR at every race because that's not how running works. Let's redo all of this so we can talk about tempo running, and then we'll fall into easy running or recovery running to finish. Okay, so we still have a lot of these variables up here. The variables we want to keep up here is this is still, for the beginning of a season, this is still a 6-minute miler in a 5K. The black hole is still here for this example. But what's going to happen in tempo running is very simple. Tempo running, which now is called threshold running, but that's not how I learned it, so I like to call it tempo. First, the thing about tempo running that's awesome is whatever you're doing, whether you have a Timex watch or a Garmin watch or a Coros watch or an Apple watch, tempo is just very simple. When I'm running easy, I have a tempo or a rhythm. Tempo running is just increasing the rhythm. You don't need a watch to tell you that you've increased your rhythm. And if I do tempo running from this mark and my coach puts a spray painted mark 1 mile up the road, I can tempo run for a mile by just increasing the rhythm I hear and feel. And that's what I like to use for this next thing instead of threshold, because threshold and sub-threshold, a lot of times for athletes, are hard to manipulate. And if you haven't had good rest, or you haven't been able to get ready for a test, you have a lot of anxiety, or you've been drinking a lot of caffeine, you can say sub-threshold and threshold all you want, but at the end of the day, our goal is to have your kid increase their tempo so they're getting more out of this particular run, instead of feeling terrible and looking at their watch every 3 seconds to see if they're putting themselves in the correct heart rate for sub-threshold. So here's what I'm going to tell you about tempo. We know that tempo has rhythm. Tempo for me, we just did speed work at 90% and then going above 90%. Tempo for me is going to usually be, as it says here, around 80%. But here's the deal for me. I like to get tempo right up to that line and come back off. Okay? In our situation, we were just talking about, we were doing 80 seconds for a 400. This is just an example so I can draw the rest of this out. 80 seconds, 400 meters. Okay? Usually tempo runs are going to last anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes. And we're putting ourselves in a situation to do multiple tempo runs at one time if we need to. So tempo runs for me oftentimes look like this at the beginning of the season. I'm going to have you go out and warm up. We already talked about doing warm up. It's going to last 15 minutes. We identified that here. I'm going to go out and do a tempo run, and I'm going to try and do 1 mile at tempo pace with a break, and then a second mile at tempo pace. Okay? First mile at tempo pace. Tempo for me, we put it right there, is going to be 6:35. I'm going to go a little bit faster, somewhere between 6:20 and 6:35. So I'm pushing above my easy pace for sure, and my tempo pace is pressing up against this lactic threshold line. Then I'm going to recover, which is here. So we're going to recover, say 3 minutes, so we get a jog. And then I'm going to do another tempo, where I'm going to press up against this threshold line again. So this workout would be 2 by 1 mile tempo, 6:35. I'm going to say 6:20 to 6:35. I oftentimes as a coach will push kids a little bit because I actually think they can handle more than they believe they can handle. I also believe that if you're running 6 minutes in a race, you probably can run a little bit faster for 1 mile. So we're going to push that a little bit. And if they do this, what ends up happening then over time is that this sits inside, the 2 to 20 minute section here. So it's a true tempo workout. And it puts us in a situation where if I do a number of these, my body gets used to doing these relatively hard, steady time per mile races or movements, not races, tempo runs. And what ends up happening is these will start to push this lactic threshold line up while our 400 are pulling this lactic threshold line up, and you get a mixture of fast, short, and then pretty fast, long or longer. You get pretty fast, longer workouts, fast, short workouts. And both of these together, again, raise this lactic threshold line. And your tempo work mimics more of a long run, in this case a 5K, over time because it puts us in a situation that we can hold for longer periods in some type of stress. Now the stress here is 80% or so of your max heart rate. I like to push it to 85% if a student athlete is strong enough because I know that they can handle it. Now kids will go, but coach, I can't handle it. What you can't handle oftentimes are these 400s. Kids oftentimes can do this with no problem. Now let's talk about that for a minute and why. Kids can do tempo runs oftentimes with no problem. Here's the reason why. We had the black hole word up here earlier. Black hole, okay? The reason I say that kids can handle tempo runs easier than they can handle speed work is very simple. Most kids are running their easy stuff too fast. So just to highlight this, easy over here is at 7 minutes. Okay, that's what we put here. On that thing it says 7:35. we want our athletes to run their easy stuff slower. But what we have happen most of the time is their first mile will be at 7:35, and then they'll simply get faster per mile through a 5-mile run, and at the end they're going to average somewhere around 7 minutes. And that's because nobody tells these student athletes that easy stuff should be easy. So if I'm going out and running, and I'm running 7:35 for a kid who can run 6 minutes, I should be able to do 5 minutes at that pace talking, and I know all of you know this, but I should be able to do it talking, and I should feel great as I do this. Okay? That's easy runs, and I'll explain a little bit more in a moment, as it compares to tempo. Again, the reason kids find tempo to be so easy versus speed work is because they're running at tempo all the time, and it's too often. We don't have kids do enough easy work. Okay, so again, easy stuff for this 8 or 6 minute miler should be at 7:35. At the end of the day, if they run 7:35 for 5 miles, their body handles this particular pressure, which is around 80%, and they're able to get more effective in their easy runs. Okay? Easy runs influence tempo runs because too many of us are running our easy runs at tempo pace, or what we call sub-threshold pace. Some of us, again, I don't want to mix the nomenclature too much, but a lot of student athletes come to me and say, Coach, I want to run at sub-threshold pace. And I say, cool, let's look at your heart rate as it relates to that. And their heart rate's at 75% of their max or 80% of their max. You're already running at sub-threshold pace. The problem is you never run easy, so you always are draining your battery. Okay? This gets in the woods a little bit. So tempo runs, push your lactate threshold up. Speed workouts, pull your lactate threshold up. Your gains live between. And again, we go from that 6 minute pace to that 5:40 pace we mentioned earlier. Okay, let's erase this for a second and talk easy runs and recovery. I know I just mentioned easy runs. So, an easy run for us. An easy run for athletes that I work with is usually going to be somewhere around, it depends how fast you are, so that definitely matters. Percentages will matter. But an easy run tends to need to be around 80 to 90 seconds slower than your hard work, or your race work in this case. So if I can have, no, just respell it over here. If I can have an athlete run an easy run, now this is more in the black hole, but an easy run as it relates to the black hole is fine as long as you're doing other things outside the black hole. So an easy run for us is going to be around 7:35, which in most cases is going to be just below the black hole. And what do we say about the black hole from a standpoint of heart rate? Normally people are running these around 75 to 80%, and most of their easy runs are 75 to 80%. Most of their speed workouts are around 80%, so we're spending too much time in this too small percentage. Easy runs should be 70% of your max or a little less, so 68 to 70%, and we want to run around to 7:35. If I do that, I can work on form, turnover ratio, cadence, all these things that allow me to become a more effective runner. This is going to be where you run a 5-mile easy run, okay? That's going to be a Monday, easy, 5, or Friday, easy, 5, okay? Tuesday, Thursday, here we had. Wednesday, we're going to talk about recovery. Thursday was our tempo day. So we did Tuesday speed work, Monday easy, 5 miles, Tuesday speed work, 200s or 400s, repeated for a lot of the year until your student athlete becomes superb at them, in which case then you can move them to 800 meters or 1 kilometer or whatever it is. Recovery, we're going to talk about in a second. Thursday is going to be tempo. Friday's going to be easy. Your easy run should be 7.5, 7:40, somewhere in there. Okay, it's going to put us at the best position to be strong and create consistencies in our body. Okay. The last one, we're going to keep easy up here because easy is 68 to 70%. The last one is recovery. And the reason, I talked about this when we were talking about tempo, the reason that so many athletes do all their easy runs in a tempo heart rate or a tempo speed is because nobody recovers. So here's the deal with recovery. if you have a battery and you, as a human being, are fully powered, anytime you go running, your battery power at some point is going to diminish some. If my battery power diminishes some, and I'm going to try and race on a day that I have a diminished battery, just like if I had my phone plugged in last night but it didn't charge, and now I plan on using it all day at my job, in my life, it's going to run out of battery power before you get to the end of your day. Same thing happens in a race. My battery power runs out. Before I end my race, we do what's called hitting the wall and our body fails. So recovery should be 65% of your max heart rate or less. Less would mean going for a walk, playing frisbee with your brother, sister, friends, mom, dad, hiking maybe, walking the dog, walking with your friends, walking to get ice cream, walking home from ice cream, or it could be done in a recovery jog, but it's going to be very, very simple. In our case, for this example, recovery is 2+ minutes slower at 8:05 for somebody who runs 6 minutes, or slower, which means you could walk 15-minute miles and put yourself in a situation where both recovery and easy are with oxygen, and as a byproduct of us having oxygen, we get to build our battery power back up. So our battery has enough juice for race day. All of these numbers, all of this information is going to be helpful for us to create the most effective you. I spend the most time on speed work and on tempo work because those things can make manipulations. Over the last couple years, I've spent more time on recovery because without recovery, you have no battery power in order to do speed work or tempo work or easy running. And so this is the main thing we should be working on with athletes, because almost all the athletes I work with, when I look at their heart rate, if this is 90% at lactic threshold, most of the athletes are in zone 4. Here, I'll do that in red. Most of my athletes are in zone 4, which is going to be above where they want to be as it relates to easy or recovery, and all they're doing is burning out their battery on every easy run and on every recovery run, because zone 4 is a place where you will use a high intensity and a lot of your battery power. Where we want student athletes to be for easy is more like zone 3, so easy would be zone 3, and I would even say low zone 3, okay? People go, what's zone 3? Depends on what your heart rate is. We can talk about that with specifics, so you can call me and I'll kind of tell you my information in a minute. Or recovery should be in zone 2. And so if we're looking at people who are running on a consistent basis and they're running, that 6-minute person who's racing runs somewhere in that 6-minute pace for racing, and their easy runs are around 7 minutes, and their pace work is at 5:30, and the recovery stuff is at 7:30. Basically what they've done is they've run all of their workouts in the black hole. What we've just discussed is changing all these things so that the pace for the athlete when they're doing speed work ends up being, we said 80 seconds, so that's 1 minute and 20 seconds times 4, 120 plus 120 is 240, 240 times 2 is 520. So their pace work for their speed should be somewhere around 520. And if you're good, every 3 weeks it'll get faster. That's speed work. Right? Your race pace is 6 minutes. That's what all this is built off of. Your easy pace at 7 minutes, as it is written here, is in zone 4. You're going too fast, you're burning out your battery. That's what's happening at easy. So easy pace for us should be 7:35, which is speed work would be in zone 4, race pace in zone 4, or sprinting at the end into zone 5. Easy running should be at 7:35 or in zone 3 for easy. And then last but not least, in order to build our battery back up, help us recover, feel good, we're going to try and go out and run above 8 minutes and in zone 2 to recover. If we do this, our body will last longer, we won't crash during our season, we'll feel great, and we'll be successful having our athletes get quicker, faster, and stronger. Caveats to think about. Every individual athlete is individual. Their growth is going to go on their own pace. My goal for all my athletes is they all become more efficient. So it's always going to be up to me to help them identify where they're at, where they want to go, what their goal is. Repetition creates growth. Everything we do here is repetitive. Things like tempo, pace will change over a season, but I give my kids 4 to 6 weeks to watch it change. I don't change their tempo every week. I won't change their speed every week. I might change their speed or their recovery pace, but one of them is going to change. That's what it says here. We're going to change one component, right? And then their easy pace is going to stay the same for a long period of time, and their recovery pace is going to stay the same for a long period of time. As a physiologist, I see 5% change in 6 weeks often. What's 5% change for a 20-minute 5K athlete? 5% change makes them a 19-minute 5K athlete. If I can have that change in the first 6 weeks I'm working with an athlete, this is where athletes want to be. What I see instead is that coaches are pushing their kids so fast that they hope they hit this, and maybe you will in 3 or 4 weeks. But then the byproduct of that is that you're going to stick there the rest of the season, or you're actually going to get worse because you get injured because you pushed too hard, too quickly. We all have incredible athletes that we work with. I am lucky to work with some of the fastest athletes around here. And I'm very lucky to have watched them go through college into semi-professional running. Some of the kids are starting with me when they're in elementary school, some at middle school, some at high school. If you keep things similar again and again and again, your student athlete should, without a watch, be able to tell you when they're running at their speed work pace, their race pace, their easy pace, and their recovery pace without being dependent on a watch, without depending on what the heart rate says on their watch. This, my friends, is just a quick overview of how running works. We, as coaches, should be helping our kids hit goals, in my opinion. I'm happy to break your pace down and go through this with you. I coach runners for a living. I help coaches understand how this could be effective for their student athletes, and I'm happy to help you. So, if you want more information, or you're interested in me helping your student athlete with very specific and easy work, not easy work, it's hard work, but consistent work, you can email me at lilyinspired@gmail.com, and I'm happy to help you. lilyinspired@gmail.com, and I can break all these things into more specificity for you and your student athlete. Each individual kid or adult is special in their own way. They're going to have growth in different ways. I said this at the beginning. We'll do another video coming up soon. If you're a student athlete who is a type 2B, fast student athlete to become a 5K'er, we may do things slightly different. If you're a type 1A athlete, from a muscle fiber standpoint, you're going to be in a position where you're an aerobic athlete. We're going to get you fast by doing aerobic work. All of this matters. I would love to answer questions. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have the best day. Thank you.